Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of The Teacher's Promise. I'm still Brett Hansen, and I'm still honored to help celebrate, inspire, and nurture educators around the world by sharing our stories and exploring important ideas that will make us all better educators. This week, we set sail, not for international waters, but international classrooms. Ellen and Mark have traveled the world teaching kids of all colors, sizes, ages, nationalities, languages, and levels. What a way to see the world. If you're interested in teaching abroad, or just want to hear stories about teaching abroad, this is the episode for you. Next week, we'll meet Stephen Jacobson, a caring and dedicated teacher at T.J. Walker Middle School in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, who reaped the rewards of great teachers when he was a kid and knew he needed to pay back all that love. His story will touch your heart. For now, let's see the world. This week, we have a couple of extraordinary teachers who have literally traveled and taught all around the world. Mark Kolinski and Ellen Levenhagen are a teaching team, a couple of people who have been lots of places, done lots of interesting things, and are going to share with us how to teach globally, abroad, in lots of different places, and why it's such a wonderful thing to do. Mark, Ellen, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, you bet. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Great. So I think everybody's going to have one of the same questions that I do. How did you get started teaching abroad? How does one begin this kind of career?
Well, for us, we were introduced to the idea of international teaching when we were in university, and we ended up becoming friends with a couple who were back doing a sabbatical. He was doing an administrative credential, and we went out to their little cabin out in the hills of Southern Illinois, and inside this cabin was just this amazing collection of African sculptures and art. And we were just kind of awed by that because we were both art students also. So we said, well, where did you get these? Tell us a story about these. And they said, well, we're international teachers. We teach in Burkina Faso in the city of Ouagadougou. And we were just just the name itself was just so exotic. And it just really sparked a real keen interest in us. We already knew we wanted to live overseas. We actually, when we graduated from college, we spent 6 months on a motorcycle traveling through Europe, and we actually were so in love with our vagabond life in Europe. We without any experience, we went to a few places looking for jobs, but we didn't score. But we ended up that seed was planted, and we continued to think about it. And then in the mid 80s, Ellen went back to school to get a teaching credential. And by the time she finished that, I'd already put in 6 years at Gibraltar, and we were ready. And we went to Northern Iowa recruitment fair, which was one of the first and oldest of the big international school recruitment fairs. And we, put it out there, and it was a big ask because Ellen didn't have any experience, and they usually it's pretty mandatory that you have to have experience. But we ended up in Kuwait right after the first Gulf War in '92. We were recruited in '91, and we got our first job, and we didn't look back from there.
Yeah, often in an international situation like that, a recruitment fair, you kind of you can't have choices. You just got to go with what's offered to you as for your first time. You don't really know anybody, and so you just kind of sit there in front of superintendents and just do the best that you can. Just talking about your passions and why you want to teach and so forth. So you kind of have to say yes to something. And Kuwait was not our first choice by any means, but it got our foot in the door, and we did it for 2 years, and then we were able to make contacts, and we ended up going to Malaysia, which was just the beginning of a dream come true.
So in Kuwait, did you teach at like a U.S. school or an international school? What type of school was that in Kuwait?
Yeah, it was called the ASK, American School in Kuwait, and so we did have quite a few American students, British students, but we also had quite a few Arab students and students that actually lived in Kuwait. So because it was not public and it did cost, quite a bit of money and compared to public schools. We got some of the wealthiest Arabs probably living in Kuwait. So it was very diverse, and that was the best experience, to teach in a very diverse school, where people came in their abayas and mothers picked their kids up, and half of my students were called Abdullah.
And of course, it was a very strange time to be, to make your entry into an international school,
Yeah,
because it was, for us, it was truly exotic, because it's a country that's just out of war. So there's still sandbag
yeah,
emplacements and ditches and trenches that were still used. Doorways had machine gun bullet holes all around them.
right.
There were, oil lakes all over the place from the fires they had started. It was a monarchy, and so it was the first time ever living in a true monarchy. And then thirdly, it was full on prohibition. We didn't There was no alcohol
No,
available. So a lot of firsts for us, but it was absolutely exotic,
quite an
really,
experience.
because of all those things. And plus being in the Middle East, so it gave us
Oh,
great access to Africa, Europe,
Cairo,
and
we went to
other Middle Eastern
Egypt.
countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was
Yeah,
great.
that's kind of amazing because at that time I was in the SEAL teams, and I mean, it just by chance I didn't end up going to the Middle East, but I could have been there on the other side in a
Yeah.
very different position. So after Kuwait, you say you went to Malaysia. How did you like Malaysia?
Well, yeah, Malaysia was fabulous. We ended up at the middle of our second year in Kuwait. We knew we weren't going to stay there. It wasn't really our cup of tea, and we were aggressively looking elsewhere. So we went to a recruitment fair run by Search Associates in Bali, a wonderful place to go look for a job. And we ended up with a number of offers, but we selected Malaysia because at that point, just anybody you talk to said, if there's one place that you could get to, if you can possibly get a job, it's in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. It's got everything. It's got natural beauty. It's got the oceans. It's got the exotic Southeast Asian culture, cuisine, all the things that sort of drive what our interest is in travel. And so we ended up there, and we spent 4 wonderful years there.
Yeah, it really was. And we have so many different groups of friends that we've met from in Kuala Lumpur. Just a week ago, we went to a reunion with a group from KL, and now they're teaching in Doha, and they've been teaching in Japan, and we taught with them there. They've been teaching in South America. And so people, you start in a place and you meet people, and then you watch them have children, you watch their children grow up, and you just stay friends. And when you meet, after 30 years, the conversations are say, hey, do you guys remember going to Bali? Do you remember going to Kota Kinabalu? You remember doing that? And so they're different conversations, I think, than teachers probably have here. And the students too are great memories. So
I think that Alan's point is really good, because I think one of the main differences between teaching internationally and teaching in the States is the sense of community that you develop with your colleagues. It's
yeah,
really the relationships you develop are really deep. They're meaningful. They're intense,
yeah.
because everybody's going to be moving on in about 4 or 5 years. At least many of the people do that. That was certainly our MO when we went into this. And so it's and the school becomes the center of that community too, not just for the teachers, but for the families, and everybody involved with the school. So many things happen. It's like a town square. So many things happen
Yeah.
at the school for the expat community. And also for us making friends. And of course, for us, we were in our mid 30s at that point, and so we were much more socially engaged than we are now. But it was a time when we really did develop some really strong relationships with both our colleagues and with the parents
Yes,
that
yes.
we
It becomes your
yeah.
family. I mean, and we were invited to parents' homes for dinner.
Mm.
I mean, how many teachers here are invited to their students' homes,
Mm.
on a Friday or Saturday night? It's just really, it's very homey. You become friends, and your students become your friends too, which is, so much what the compassion thing is all about. And because they depend on you and you depend on them. Um, so it is a very tight community.
So how big were these schools? Most part, I mean, were they about the same size? Were some much
They're
larger?
Some were larger,
Oh,
some were smaller. I mean, the schools we worked in were all about 1,500,
yeah.
somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 students. That's K-12. And except for Singapore American School, which was probably it's the largest
4,000.
single campus American or international school in the world, which is over 4,000 students.
Yeah.
Shanghai had about 3,200 students, but that was on two different campuses.
Right.
So, and of course, those schools have, like Shanghai, I think, has a different enrollment at this point than it did when we were there. Um, so,
Yeah.
but generally about 1,500 students K-12, which I guess
Yeah.
is about like what you would have in Sturgeon Bay or Southern Door.
The smaller communities.
Yeah, Southern Door about 1,200. So yeah, it's about the
Mhm.
same size for the district.
Mhm.
Now, you've already talked about compassion. You know, this podcast is focused on compassion, and we do want to hear about that. But I think people would be really curious to hear about the financial parts. You know, it's expensive to travel and salary. Can you tell our audience a little bit about, you know, the salary and the benefits and the financial pros and cons of teaching abroad?
Well, that is probably the biggest pro. Well, the travel, of course, and the experience of living in foreign countries. But oh my gosh, Brett, the salaries, especially in Asia, they were they were so much more, I think, than what teachers are making here because we got a really good salary. And I had only been teaching for 2 years, and I still probably started with more than what teachers end up with here. And you got your rent paid for, so your housing was paid for. You got a stipend to fly home every summer. You got your insurance covered. You got, yeah, so all your medical
Retirement.
bills, retirement, and then you got a really nice retirement package at the end of every year. So we didn't get the pensions that teachers get here, but we took we took our money that the school gave us, our savings, and just put it into funds.
So,
So
so the other thing is that I think it's really important to know that when you earn foreign earned income, you're a bona fide foreign resident.
right,
So you're earning foreign earned income, and that allows you to take a foreign earned income tax
tax,
exclusion. So
yeah,
you don't have to pay any taxes on income under 100, and I think it's like $101, $110 or something like that.
yeah,
$110,000 now. So it's about a little over $100,000. You're tax free. So you have to report, of course, all international teachers who are American have to report their taxes, but that's a big deal. So if you're starting it and your salary is 50,000, but you're not paying any taxes on that. And in many of the
yes,
countries we worked in, we also didn't have to pay taxes in because either the school picked up the taxes
right,
or the country forgave them. Or we were just in Vienna, we had a tax treaty with Vienna. In Shanghai, the school paid our taxes. In Kuwait, the school paid our taxes. And but other
Interesting,
places like in Malaysia and Singapore, we had to pay taxes, but they were pretty low. They weren't that high. So again, so imagine what if you were making 50,000 clear after taxes. So that's was one of the benefits, and of course, many of the schools paid much more than that, and you still had a very low tax liability involved with all that. So um, it was that was a big benefit.
yeah,
I think the other one is the school was some schools were more generous than others with their total packages, but generally the packages were very strong, very attractive. And I think this is something that kind of goes back to maybe digging back into the compassion part of it. Um, the boards and the parents of the communities that really own these schools. They were parent community owned schools, just like a public school is here, but they're private. So there's no owner of these schools. They're owned by the community of the families who send their kids there. There's usually an automatic board member who's from the U.S. Embassy. That every school we worked in had a board member, a seat that was reserved for U.S. Embassy, and then other than that, they were voted in from the parent community. But one of the important things to say about that is that the board made it as a mission, made it as a goal to create packages that attracted the very best teachers they could get. But it wasn't just attract; it was to attract and retain. So really, their policy was very specific in this. They wanted the best teachers they could possibly get internationally for their children. So it was a kind of a high-powered parent community, highly educated, and very aggressive in terms of having very strong educational institution for their kids.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that is an important point in a way that we show respect to professionals. I try really hard to stay away from too much talk about politics or money on the podcast because it's for educators in the United States. It can be, a dark hole to slip down into. But that is good news that traveling and teaching abroad, the organizations try to show their respect financially the way so many other organizations or so many other professions are respected in the United States.
Right.
So
And
that's great news.
yeah, I should just put a caveat out there. We're speaking from I think a somewhat limited perspective when it comes to the quality of schools. We were very, very fortunate, and we ended up in pretty much all blue chip schools, meaning they were the very top schools in any of the capitals that we worked in. And so there were in many of the capitals there were multiple international schools of various quality. So there was a range of quality and facilities that these schools, and of course, and that was directly related to the tuitions that they charge. So
Sure. Yeah.
so we were always a very high tuition school, but also a very high quality school with usually really amazing facilities, excellent staff, and a really strong parent community.
Yeah.
That's our perspective is limited to that very high end. We can't really speak about the quality, the professional quality of the schools that we didn't work in, and maybe have slightly lower tuitions.
Sure. That's understandable. So back to the compassion perspective, what did you notice that was different about teacher relationships with students abroad? Was there anything noticeably different, or would it have seemed like a high quality classroom in the United States?
Well, one thing, Brett, is our classes were my class. My biggest class was usually 22 students, and as an art teacher, I always said, the the counselor would come and say, "Ellen, can you take one more person? They really want to take your class." I'm like, "Oh, okay," so I'd go up to 22. And I know that in the States, classes are a little bit bigger than that, and so and as an art teacher, you only have so much space in your art room. But so that was one thing. Our class sizes were reasonable, and then our expectations after school, we could choose to coach, we could choose to be club sponsors. There was a couple of schools where you had to do one thing, after school, but there was so much going on after classes too, to support students and their interests in uh, um, just their interests in art, their interests in music, drama, certainly fundraising opportunities, social service opportunities, and of course sports. And so that was one thing. And there was just the students were always, we were the family, so they always wanted to be involved. And so the school it didn't end at 3:15; it kept on going. And so you got to know your students in different ways, just besides the classroom. So
Yeah,
That's
I would
great.
just add on to what Ellen was saying. I think one of the strengths of the schools, I think almost every school we were in was the ability to do service programs with kids. And so
yeah,
both Ellen and I were really involved with the Habitat for Humanity, and we did trips in the Philippines, Bangladesh, Thailand, um, in South Africa,
Africa. Yeah,
and yeah, in Malawi, South Africa, in southern Africa, and so that those types of trips were really had a deep impact on both Ellen and I, and they also had deep impact on the kids because it gave them a sense of perspective, number one, and I think number two, it went beyond sort of developing empathy. I think it really went to compassion, and when I try to think about what compassion is, it's not just it's sort of having empathy, but it has action involved with it. So these students were out there, and they were actually giving their labor, giving their fundraising monies to
yeah,
help um, I gotta just shut that off. Anyways, giving money to these organizations, and they were seeing things and engaging with the people in these villages firsthand. And every one of those students said that for them, they've never had any idea that the experience would be that deeply meaningful, and they were sure that it would be something that would stick with them for the rest of their life. So
Yeah.
it was a real compassion developing program. Whether or not we were doing all that much good for the people that we were working with, we were surely we were doing some, but I think in the larger sense, it was really helping to develop compassion with our
Yeah.
students.
That's a good story. So what's new for the two of you back here in the States? I think you said you're done with the international teaching. What's going on now? What's new for you?
Yeah, so in international teaching, many of the schools has a mandatory retirement age of 65. So we reached that last year, and so we returned to the States happily. One of the things about being overseas is that you miss a lot of things, particularly with your family. So we were really committed to returning to the States, even though we know many people who just stay internationally through their retirement. But we wanted to return to the States. We wanted really to be to engage with our family deeply. And then the other thing is that we have a studio in a gallery that we started back in 2003 that we've been sort of limping along while we were overseas, but now we can throw ourselves into that. It's called Clay on Steel in Algoma. And it's been a great adventure for us to be back here and start getting this business really up and rolling, and really sort of developing our artwork.
And I'm doing a lot of teaching. I offer classes, pottery classes, and really try and kind of encourage families and friends to come. And the best thing is that I'm getting grandmas, daughters, and grandchildren in. We have 7 wheels, and so I had 3 generations in on potter's wheels, and it was just so sweet. And guess who helps who most? The granddaughter helping grandma. And so
Yeah.
you see this, and of course I'm helping everybody, but just to see the connection that people have when they do creative things together. Groups of people coming in, groups of women coming in before a wedding, as a group of bridesmaids, and just laughing together. And so I am really appreciating having the opportunity to continue teaching my passion, which is ceramics, in our clay studio and gallery. And so, it doesn't end. The joy and the compassion and the friendships, it's keep going.
Just keep it going.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story of this international travel from Gibraltar to Kuwait to Malaysia to Singapore, Vienna. Did I miss any place? Any other countries you were at?
Tokyo, Japan. That was
Oh yeah, in Japan. So that's some extraordinary travel, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom and compassion with all these wonderful children around the world. It doesn't matter whether they're from America, American, Japanese, Kuwaiti. It doesn't matter. They're kids, and we want to love them up. So thank you very much for doing all that, and thank you for sharing your funny stories and for bringing your skills and talents back to your home area. We'll put the notes on Clay on Steel and these organizations in case people are interested in them in the show notes. But most importantly, just thank you for being educators. Thank you for traveling around the world. Thank you for always staying focused on what's really important, and that's our children and the love and compassion that we can share with them. So thanks for being on the show.
And domo arigato.
Great. Domo arigato. Great. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so long.
So thanks again for joining us and believing that all children are our children and that all kids deserve our intelligent compassion. And please make sure you join us again next week to hear Stephen's story. I know I've said it many times, but I will improve my Facebook skills so we can communicate better on social media. And I don't know why it's so hard for me, but it is. But I'll get there because it's important. Finally, always remember, you must take care of yourself in order to take care of others. So please do that. Take care of yourself and maybe some other teachers around. And if you know of a wonderful teacher who should be on the show, send me an email. You can go to HansonEducationServices.com or theteacherspromise.com and click on the contact information at the bottom. Take care of yourself. See you soon.